Someone left a really great question on my previous video. They asked, how will the new classification of accountants as non-professional degrees affect future accountants? So in this video, I'm going to break down what changed, what didn't change, and whether this affects your CPA path, and what accounting students should do going forward. So let's start with what actually changed. Beginning in July 2026, under the updated Federal Repayment Assistance Plan, annual graduate federal loan limits will decrease from $50,000 to $20,500 for degrees categorized as non-professional. A number of degrees that used to be labeled as professional, including nursing, engineering, architecture, and accounting, will now be treated as standard graduate degrees for loan purposes. Degrees that remain categorized as professional include pharmacy, dentistry, and veterinarian medicine, to name a few. But here is the important part, and the part I really want to emphasize. This affects graduate students only. It does not affect bachelor degrees in any way. Let's get into what didn't change. According to a Thomson Reuters article titled, "Accounting Degrees Downgraded by the U.S. Department of Education Sparks Outrage," the Department of Education states that this classification, and I quote, "is an internal classification for loan purposes only, not a value judgment on the importance or inherent professionalism of the degree." End quote. What they are essentially saying is that just because accounting is now considered a non-professional degree does not mean accounting is not valuable. It is still an extremely important career. Accounting still pays very well, so if you want to earn six figures, you can definitely achieve that working in accounting. And if you wanted to earn multiple six figures, you could definitely do that as well at the director level, depending on how far you want to move up the corporate accounting ladder. In addition to paying well, accounting still offers a lot of job security. It has a lot of job opportunities. Per the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, the accounting career is projected to grow 5%, adding 124,000 jobs year over year from 2024 to 2034. So there's definitely still a lot of job stability and availability in accounting. However, accounting organizations are fighting back to the classification of accounting as a non-professional degree. For instance, NASBA, AICPA, and state CPA societies are actively lobbying against this change in classification. For example, NASBA stated, "NASBA will consult with the 55 U.S. accounting jurisdictions it represents and will engage with policymakers to ensure that accounting is restored to a professional degree." So, accounting may be restored to a professional degree classification if these organizations are successful. I personally agree with these organizations. I do believe that accounting should be called a professional degree due to the fact that many accounting students do want to become CPAs, which requires 150 credit hours compared to the 120 credit hours that you would get through a bachelor's degree. So a lot of students do think that pursuing a master's degree is the way to go about getting those 150 credit hours. However, this is important. I have never advocated for accounting students to earn their 150 credit hours through a master's degree. The reason I've never suggested to accounting students get a master's degree is because from a financial standpoint, graduate schools place a huge financial burden on students. You already paid for your bachelor's degree. Most likely you've taken out a huge student loan to help you pay for this, and taking on additional debt through a master's program so that way you can obtain your 150 credit hours just does not make sense to me from a financial perspective. I think that it's important to remember that this is capping a loan amount. Essentially, it's saying instead of giving you $50,000, we'll only give you $20,500. However, you have to realize it's still a loan. You are still responsible for paying back that loan. You are still taking on debt. This is not the route that I would recommend, regardless if it's a professional degree or a non-professional degree. Instead, what I would recommend, and what I personally did, is I think that students should graduate with their bachelor's degree in accounting. Then the first thing you need to do is find a job in accounting. You want to start applying to staff accountant positions and obtain your first position. The reason this is so important is because the most crucial thing when you are an accountant is getting experience. So you want to start trying to get experience as soon as possible, because the second you become a staff accountant, the sooner you are going to be able to be promoted to a senior accountant, which means the sooner you're able to get to that manager level, which means the sooner you're able to start making six figures, which is ultimately the goal of everyone, is to get a career where you are paid well, where you can have a good living. So my advice to you is get your bachelor's degree and start working ASAP. What if you decide you don't even like accounting and you want to work in finance, for example? If you would have got your master's degree immediately after your bachelor's degree, you would have wasted so much money on your master's degree. And if you had sat for the CPA, that wouldn't even be necessary anymore because you don't even like accounting. So I would recommend working in accounting to see, do you even want to pursue your CPA? The reason this is also important, in addition to being able to be promoted sooner, is the fact that most companies offer a tuition reimbursement program. What that means is they will actually give you money to help you pay for your tuition, and it's not a loan. You do not have to pay them back. This is going to be very helpful for relieving the financial burden off of students because companies are willing to help you pay for your education. The only caveat is a lot of companies have a policy where when you start these tuition reimbursement programs, you have to sign a contract where you say that you will continue to work for the company for X amount of years after you completed these classes. Otherwise, you have to pay them back. So you do want to keep that in mind. When you do start a tuition reimbursement program, you do typically have to work for a company for a set period of time. Once you do decide, however, that you do like accounting and you do decide that you do want to pursue making up the additional credit hours required to get your CPA, I highly recommend that you go to a community college. A lot of community colleges have programs in place that are specifically designed for students to achieve the additional credit hours between their bachelor's degree and the hours required to be eligible to sit for the CPA. That is personally what I did. A lot of these programs actually include an accounting certificate. However, I would not recommend going through the whole program just to get the accounting certificate. I would recommend taking the hours you need in order to make up the difference. This is going to save you money as well because community colleges are much cheaper than larger universities. That is going to save you so much money, and it's going to prevent you from taking on additional debt just to be able to sit for the CPA. And the benefit of that is once you do actually become CPA eligible, a lot of these companies will also pay for you to sit for the CPA. They will pay for your study materials, and that also will save you a few $1,000s, which again alleviates a financial burden. My final thoughts are, don't be worried about accounting not being considered a professional degree anymore. Sure, it stinks that accounting is no longer considered a professional degree. However, there are accounting organizations lobbying to restore accounting to the professional classification. Even if it was a professional degree, I would never recommend that you pursue a master's degree in accounting just to make up the hours to sit for the CPA exam. If you found this video helpful, definitely consider liking it and subscribing to my channel.